Hey everyone, my name is Razzy, and before I start this review, I'd just like to say that I haven't watched a single review for this game yet. So everything you're going to hear here is directly representative of only my experience with this game. Oh, and this is a spoiler-free review. I'm not even going to talk that much about the specifics of the story or the gameplay, just what I thought of it overall. Let's begin. Dishonored 2 is nearly everything I wanted out of a sequel to one of my favorite games in recent memory, and yet something about it falls short of my expectations. Let's try and do this through the process of elimination, starting with the narrative. The main plot of Dishonored 2, taking place 15 years after the first, is more complex than its predecessor, with more developed characters. The two playable protagonists are voiced this time around, giving them more personality and allowing me to relate to them better. Personally, I enjoyed playing as Emily more than Corvo when it came to the story, for a couple very silly reasons. Ever since they first showed gameplay for Dishonored 2, I was hesitant about Corvo's voice actor, the voice of Garrett from the iconic Thief games. Choosing him as the voice of the main character of a game heavily inspired by Thief is awesome, and he does a fine job in Dishonored 2. He's somewhat generically gruff like every other badass in every video game ever, but that's not the real problem. The main issue is that some of his lines and the lines of people talking to him, especially at the beginning of the game, feel like they were being read for the first time. It seems like the game would like you to play as Emily more than Corvo because for some reason it just seems like more effort was put into her character, which is completely fine.
There's a legend in the City Watch, the Empress's last resort, the safe room inside your daughter's chambers, is holding enough gold to buy an island.
And they say this is one of the only two keys.
What happened? Alexei, the throne room, Emily. Nothing I can do alone. I need to get out of here.
There's a legend in the Tower Guard about the Empress's last resort, a safe room inside your chambers holding enough gold to buy a good-sized island.
And they say that this ring is one of the only two keys to exist.
What happened? Alexei. The throne room. Father. Nothing I can do alone. I need to get out of here.
Once again, most of the flaws I'm going to mention throughout this review are extremely nitpicky, and don't really detract from the overall experience. Otherwise, the story takes you to so many interesting places, allowing you to see more of Dishonored's fully realized and wonderfully fleshed out lore. From the very moment this game starts, I just got sucked into its world. I could just forget my life and exist in this one whenever I played. Something a game hasn't done for me in a very long time. You'll read books and notes, listen to audio diaries, overhear conversations, and examine highly detailed environments which all tell a story of their own. This is where the game's story truly shines, when it doesn't hold your hand and lets you figure things out for yourself. That's not to say the more scripted story beats are bad by any stretch. The overarching narrative is great, but the game does have an issue with subtlety sometimes. We get it, Corvo is Emily's father. People who are fans of the original game would have known or suspected these kinds of things already. It might strengthen the bond between these characters, but it's not like it's vital to the plot for us to constantly be reminded of things like this. I know I've only mentioned one example, but when you play through it, you might notice a couple.
I remember training with my father in the years after the rat plague. What training regimen does Father have in store for me today?
That's my girl. Yes. You hit hard. That's my daughter.
The men who sent the assassin tried to use me as a pawn in a game of power. They would have succeeded, but my father, Corvo Attano, hunted them down and cut their conspiracy to pieces. A monster the papers are calling the Crown Killer has been picking off my enemies and dressing it up like my father and I are responsible.
Emily.
You look tired, Father. Royal Protector and Father. I should have passed a law against that combination of titles years ago.
The game can be pretty exposition heavy at times, with moments where you can barely move at all and have to listen to someone tell you a lot of things so that you understand the greater plot. Anyway, that's yet another nitpick. So yeah, it's not the story that's the problem. Overall, it's utterly enchanting and compelling, fairly unexpectedly emotional at times, and it fleshes out the lore of Dishonored even more, taking you to fascinating places with enthralling villains and engrossing allies. I don't think you should come to Dishonored just for the story though. Its world has always been completely rich and spellbinding, for lack of a better word. But the overarching plot is generally about getting revenge and taking back what's yours. And that's no problem at all. So what is it then? The gameplay? Both of Dishonored 2's playable characters come with unique powers that can also be upgraded for different effects using the numerous ruins littered around these much more expansive environments. Combine the powers with the many weapons and all the bone charms you could want, and you might be playing entirely differently to someone else. There is a greater variety of weapons this time around, with a range of new crossbow bolts, mines, grenades, etc. The addition of merchants allows you to purchase and upgrade equipment during missions. They might even sell you information and other helpful mission-specific items. Once again, Dishonored 2 places a huge emphasis on letting you play how you'd like. You can approach missions both lethally and non-lethally, and with all of the mechanics in the game and the incredible level design, there are so many ways of going about each of these approaches. I love how you are encouraged to fully explore the different levels, uncovering information from multiple sources before all your options are revealed to you. This was obviously done in Dishonored 1 and it's not unheard of in gaming, but the scale of the levels in this game in comparison to the first helps give a whole new meaning to play your way. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Clockwork Mansion and the Crack in the Slab mission because these are the kind of things you have to experience yourself. All I'll say is that these are two of my favorite levels from any game I've played in recent memory. Once again, Arcane Studios has surprised me with its originality and imagination. These levels are perhaps the best representations of their expert skills in level design. What's even more impressive is the fact that the world is designed for two characters with their own unique abilities this time around. I'm sure I'll still be figuring out different approaches to missions after several playthroughs. So often do video games use dialogue options and other limited branching tree choice systems to apply the illusion of choice or simply allow for a few predetermined options. Dishonored 2 is one of those games that uses its systems to tell small, hilarious, and awesome gameplay stories unique to each player. Sure, the game does have a few predetermined endings, and the overarching narrative itself doesn't change all too much depending on your approach, but its extremely polished mechanics and smart AI, which occasionally bug out, let you wreak havoc in such unexpected ways. And don't get me wrong, your approach in certain missions will definitely affect the world going forward, in fairly large and small ways.
Blasphemer! Revenge! I'll cure the world!
Some new gameplay additions I really liked included the ability to strangle enemies during combat if you block their attack just right. This gives you a second chance to eliminate your enemy non-lethally if spotted and force it to combat. I also like how you can now do non-lethal aerial attacks. Attacking someone from above was something I always missed during my non-lethal ghost playthroughs of Dishonored 1. With regards to powers, I loved Emily's far reach ability and the fact that you can pull people through the air towards you if you'd like. Corvo's blink kick ability was also a personal favorite. Regular kicking, on the other hand, is nearly entirely contextual, and it uses the same button as attacking. If only there was another button or combination of buttons that it could be assigned to. Perhaps they decided on this route because an individual kicking command would outshine Corvo's blink kick ability, but even if you can't decide specifically when you want to kick in the game, it's still cool to be able to do it during combat. Far reach can also feel slightly sticky and contextual at times. Originally, I was going to complain about the fact that there are so many bone charms this time around that new ones often get lost in a fairly unorganized list of old ones. That was until I remembered that you can craft bone charms in this game. It's a fairly interesting system and one that fits well into Dishonored 2's lore and gameplay, allowing you to rid yourself of certain charms you know you're not going to use in your playthrough. But personally, I didn't really use this system all too much, and that is why the bone charm list got really cluttered, and it was difficult to keep track of which bone charms I had just collected. So yeah, aside from a few minor complaints that I probably wouldn't even know how to change or fix, the gameplay in Dishonored 2 is fantastic. It's just as open-ended as Dishonored 1, but it's amplified by the larger levels with more pathways, side quests, and other means of uncovering information, as well as a greater variety of weapons, powers, and bone charms the player has at his or her disposal. So it's not the story and it's not the gameplay. Could it be an issue with the graphics or the presentation? Dishonored 2 maintains the signature aesthetic of Dishonored 1. As many have already said, this game looks like an oil painting in motion. Granted, it's not the most graphically impressive game out there. Some of the textures are rather flat at times. It's no Uncharted 4 or Battlefield 1, but like the first game, the art style and the lighting more than make up for it. It's also more likely to age well. And it's not a linear game, so achieving that kind of graphical fidelity is much harder in Dishonored. I love the way buildings look as if crafted from clay and painted with pastel colors. The intricately designed architecture, in-game branding, and the menus are all something to marvel at. The maps are bigger than the original, but they're also equally as detailed and handcrafted. Dishonored 2 is the kind of game where you just seem to stop every now and then just to take it all in. Each mission has a distinctly different mood with varying architecture and things to see. It also makes the world feel far more alive when there are so much more people inhabiting it. I know Dunwall is intended to be dark and grim in the first game because of all the plague, misery, and death. Karnaca is arguably as deadly as Dunwall, complete with its own kind of plague, but it's a lot more vibrant and exotic. More people roam the streets and engage in numerous activities. You can also talk to them if you'd like. If you were to look for things to complain about, which obviously I'm doing right now, the game can suffer from the same problems Bioshock Infinite had with its population. Thankfully, people don't disappear when the shit hits the fan, but they do occasionally feel like automated beings in that they don't really pay all too much attention to you. They'll remark on things as you walk past them and scream and call the guards if you do something horrible. But you can steal things from right under their noses and they won't say a word. The most ironic example of this is when beggars ask you for money. You can give them money and then right after just rob them of the very few supplies they have lying near them as they watch you. This kind of thing just made me feel rather disconnected from the world and characters sometimes. So yeah, clearly I can nitpick the hell out of anything. These tiny gripes are nowhere near significant enough for Dishonored 2 to fall short of my expectations. So here is the biggest problem with Dishonored 2. Its performance. Dishonored 1 was such an unexpected gem for me, something I didn't even know existed until I saw it after release. It seemed to come out of nowhere, one of the most original IPs in a while, with so much polish and integrity. It ran well on both PC and consoles, and Dishonored 2 kind of tarnishes that reputation, with a less than lackluster PC version on release date. The PS4 version only occasionally dips in frame rate, but I have experienced numerous technical issues and glitches, including falling through the floor, guards clipping into one another, textures jittering, and white lines flashing between seams of buildings and other structures. Dishonored 2 is by no stretch broken on PS4, and a lot of these problems will probably be fixed soon in an update. They might even be fixed at the time that you're watching this review. It's just sad that such a content-rich package that deserves more attention has had such a terrible launch, primarily on PC. I see Dishonored as a game built by gamers for gamers, not the kind of thing companies churn out every year with less and less content and more paid DLC for a quick buck. Don't get me wrong, I love Dishonored 2. I love nearly everything about it, and I'm probably going to be playing it and figuring out new things about it for years to come. It's my game of the year so far. But it's just such a shame to see something so unique, something I personally felt had so much integrity, get slept on by an entire community of gamers because of something so silly as a bad port. And I'm not sure it will recover from this. I want games like Dishonored 2 to be far more successful. I want more games like this to be made. And now, perhaps because the game was forced out to the public before it was complete, we might not see something this unique with such a sizable budget for a while. And for you guys on PC, I hope the game is fixed soon, because sadly, you're missing out on something great, and that's not your fault.
The years are long, but it's always good to see a familiar face.
No mercy!